Good evening and welcome to another very special Daily Maverick webinar. My name is Greg Nicholson and today I'm joined by Jonathan Shapiro, better known as the cartoonist, editorial cartoonist for Daily Maverick, Zapiro. He needs no introduction. We're here today for the launch of his 2020 annual Do the Macorona. It's a selection of his cartoons that have been published in Daily Maverick over the last year. Today what's going to happen is Jonathan's going to walk us through some of the cartoons that he's selected for this book. And he's going to talk through that for about 30 minutes, taking us through his process, some of his thinking behind these cartoons. And I'm extremely excited for that because it has been an extremely big year if you think about what's happened in the last 12 months. First of all, I think we need to thank 10X for sponsoring this event. And I need to let you know that there will be signed copies available to buy through this webinar if you keep an eye out on the chat section for that. And as Jonathan presents his cartoons over the last years and talks us through them, please pop in your questions in the chat section, and then we'll work through as many of them as we can in the remaining time. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks. Looking forward to this.
Okay, so for now, over to you.
Okay, so yes, there we are. Yeah, absolutely crazy year. It's a year like no other. Every year when I do one of these books, it's a great challenge for me to try and find something that really encapsulates what the year was about, and this came out of one of the cartoons which I'm going to show you just now. But certainly you can see all the weirdness of greeting people and wearing masks and all the Macarona. I found myself singing the song, the Macarena, which is how the cartoon happened, and then that of course became the Macorona. But you see that the theme of the year is very much the idea of all the stuff that we had to do. And then just on the far right, you see, well, unfortunately, the corruption kicks in, and there's one Ace Magashula. Of course, you will have seen some news about Ace and a lot more about that in a little while. But go back almost exactly a year ago. This is what happened. It was the most phenomenal experience for so many of us. I mean, we had been through two Rugby World Cup wins, but this one really seemed to need SAA. They just fly in superheroes, and it's hard to imagine what has happened in that year since then. But actually, there was another celebration that was happening almost simultaneously, and that was Daily Maverick turned 10, and they're on a mission from God. Stilly and Branko, the News Brothers, and they're down there at the bottom. Defend truth. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it. Well, you know, these two crazy people who we love a lot here at Daily Maverick, right at the top, they're featuring hashtag Gupta Leaks and all their greatest hits with the all-star band, Newshounds, Wordsmiths, Dung Diggers, and Scorpio Stingers. There's a lot more in this cartoon. I won't be able to go through it all. Have a look in the book. The Daily Maverick has been an unbelievably important part of South Africa's uncovering of state capture and a hell of a lot more. And it really is it's a privilege for all of us who work at Daily Maverick. At the beginning of this year, even before, the idea of the coronavirus was sort of floating around somewhere, but it was like somewhere in China. It sort of really didn't appear. We'd had SARS, we'd had MERS, we'd had various other things. We'd even had a very deadly epidemic, not a pandemic, Ebola, right in Africa, but nothing had really hit the way the coronavirus hit. And at the beginning of the year, we were already in trouble, but it was really financial trouble, economic trouble. And there's, when the budget day came, rehearsal in progress, steady and juggle. And there's bailouts and union demands and Eskom, and you'll see all the kind of stuff that we know, Tito's budget. And, you know, so that he must have kind of agreed how difficult this was going to be, because he tweeted, oh dear. And that was just the beginning of what was going to be an incredibly difficult year. But it didn't start so differently for us. The gathering was held, the Daily Mavericks gathering every year. They're sometimes in Johannesburg, they do them in Cape Town, and that was when we saw the first case of coronavirus in South Africa. You see that up there on the screen. And Branko, our Serbian editor, nobody knows how to do his accent. He says we all do it crap, but all the fake news writers, we're busy with real news. At that very moment, you see down in the bottom right there's Iqbal Survey, independent, that published the most absurd conspiracy theory stuff. Daily Maverick paid student writers to smear Dr. Survey. Iqbal Survey, egomaniac par excellence, and he sort of imagined something or other, and that came out right at the time. So this was shown on the screen at the gathering, and it was kind of fun to have that up there, to really, it's always nice to sort of hit the big news and the sort of in-house news all at the same time. But still, first case in South Africa, that was kind of where we were. I was still often doing cartoons that were using the coronavirus. Well, we weren't really calling it COVID-19 yet. We were calling it the coronavirus, and I was sort of using it to say things about other things, not so much about the virus itself. Also at the gathering, an idea was flighted by one Robert Applebaum, and a lawyer, who flighted the idea of amnesty for people who'd committed, state capture and all that stuff. And that might be a way of handling it in South Africa. So there you see coronavirus. So I'm playing with the coronavirus. It's still not such a thing that I'm doing stuff about the virus itself, but I'm using it to sort of make a comment about other things. There's this idea, this amnesty, which is a sort of aerosol with flowers and so on. Testing on the other side, prosecution, Shamila Batoy, and that was clearly something that I support. I don't support this idea of amnesty, so I'm kind of showing it in a bit of an effete way. There's the Guptas and Basasa and Dudumyeni and Ace Magashula and all of the rest of the Agritzi up there. There's so many, I'm not going to go through them all. Right above her, you see, of course, Jacob Zuma. There's Iqbal Survey in the top right, and Marcus Jooste. And there are, I really hope that this amnesty idea doesn't catch on. It's very bizarre to me that even Thuli Madonsela has talked about amnesty as a possibility. I mean, one of the central people who helped us get to where we are with the Zondo Commission. But, luckily, I don't think amnesty is going to catch on. I think that there are going to be prosecutions, and they've already started. And then the coronavirus is really here. On the 15th of March, it was announced that there'd be a national state of disaster. We were in a state of disaster. Schools were to close, travel restrictions, all sorts of things, and that our lockdown would start soon. And we realized the whole thing was global. Going viral, the Macorona. Keep your social distance around about a meter. Don't shake hands, use the elbow with the feeder. Avoid big crowds, you should rather be alone. Ay, Macorona. Sneeze into your elbow, it's essential hygiene. If you're symptomatic, maybe self-quarantine. It's all gone global from Beijing to Barcelona. Ay, Macorona. Clean hands often with hand sanitizer. Listen to official medical advisor. Ignore fake news when it pings on your phone. Ay, Macorona. Conspiracies, forget them. And religious polemic, it's not God's fury, it's a viral pandemic. Don't trust Trump, he's a fucking morona. Ay, Macorona. And shortly after that, we were genuinely in complete lockdown. On the 26th of March, our lockdown actually began, and so did a lot of lockdowns all over the world, but it already affected other places a lot more than us. And at that very moment, one of my great heroes, Albert Uderzo, the artist of Asterix, died, age 92, not from COVID-19, and I decided to do asterisks versus pandemics. All together, all apart, hold it off till the magic potion's ready. And the magic potion, as you see, bottom left, COVID-19 vaccine, what we're waiting for. And we may actually have some news just in the last day or two. Not 100% sure yet, but so there's that vaccine. And of course, the Getafix the Druid, and there's Asterix and there's Obelix. They represent France, but down there, the other druids, the whole the COVID-19, it started in China. There's a Chinese druid there, there's a German druid, and then, as I say, France, the little guy on the right of Obelix is from Spain. He's one of the actual characters. Spain had been very badly affected. Italy, with an old population, affected very strongly, above Asterix, the old guy. And then Iran had been affected early on, right in the middle. And then at the top, there's South Korea. On the top right, you see gave me a chance to do the kind of the Norse, you know, that sort of, that character, the blonde, the word is just escaping me. Everyone else knows exactly what I'm trying to say. But the Scandinavian countries, and then right at the top there, you see America, which was already becoming almost the epicenter, but it was, and then there's Brazil, there's Kenya at the top left, and of course South Africa. And I just want to say one more thing about Uderzo. The reason that Uderzo means such a lot to me is that when I was 21 years old and I was in Paris trying to decide whether or not to become a cartoonist instead of a very bad architectural student, I rang Uderzo's doorbell at 11 o'clock at night because I got lost in Paris, unannounced, and he let me in. And he spoke with me through his daughter, who translated from French. She was about my age. And I've never forgot that. And it's certainly not the reason I became a cartoonist, but it's a really catalytic moment for me, a big moment. So this meant a lot to me. Now, I've mentioned that the United States, Vikings, that's the word I was trying to look for. Sorry. Yes, top right. And then America was becoming through utterly bad management by Donald Trump and through callousness and complete idiocy, was becoming the epicenter of the virus. And Donald Trump, of course, was uttering a whole lot of nonsense. Desperate need for US lockdown experts. Of course, the double meaning of the lockdown. You're going to they need lockdown. Trump is going everywhere without a mask and poo-pooing the virus. And of course, you just need to lock that mouth of his. Which brings us to the next cartoon, which is about, well, have a look. Deaths nearing 50,000, and I've got him in lockdown. Amateur. So that little coronavirus, well, of course, that's the usual exaggeration you have in cartooning. It's not as if this is a little virus. It has got the world in lockdown, the coronavirus, but that massive thing behind is the fake news virus. And it says, panic, conspiracy, COVID-19 created in lab. They're withholding cure. Half the world will die. And on that phone down there, it says, important, pass this message on to all your friends. Or everything's spelled incorrectly. I've been very resistant, possibly because I know a lot of journalists. But no, I just think that I'm not a cynic, but I'm a skeptic. And I'm very skeptical of things that people send. And I definitely don't pass things on. I haven't for a long time. I think people are more aware of it now. But I received a lot of absolute crap from people who I would have thought would know better. Nowadays, people are doing a little more fact-checking, being a little more careful. But the other important thing I just want to point out about fake news, it can go either way. It is so dangerous because on the one hand, fake news can spread panic, like some of the stuff here, the conspiracy theory, all that stuff. On the other hand, it could also breed absolute dismissiveness and complacency because people say, oh, somebody's faking this thing, it's not real, it's Fauci making stuff in it, with Bill Gates making stuff in a lab and making money from it, and they knew this was going to happen in 20. Of course they knew things like this were going to happen because this is what happens when a virus hits, a viral pandemic hits the world. Back home, we were seeing some good leadership from Cyril Ramaphosa and a few of the people around him, and Dr. Nkiza, the health minister. They were bringing in some emergency regulations, but at that very moment, the last ratings agency that was holding off on junk status for South Africa downgraded us to junk, and there that emergency vehicle is kind of stuck somewhere as he opens the bonnet. Oh, great. I mean, that's the engine that's driving, so we're in a even worse economic situation than we were before, at the very time when we need to pump money into this thing because the economy is tanking. So the next one is, for me, a very important one. I think one of the most important things about the coronavirus or about any viral pandemic is that it actually exacerbates the fault lines that exist in any society, ours and any other society. And in our case, there we go. If those of you know Greek mythology, Sisyphus, the guy who had to push the boulder up the hill and never get to the top. So there's Cyril pushing this thing up the hill, but there are going to be these other boulders that just make it even more difficult. They roll down. Poverty, apartheid geography, inequality, apartheid-style lockdown. That's a sort of brutal police and army crackdown, absolutely unnecessary nonsense and killing of people, even and humiliating them. People who live in townships compared to people who live in cities, their unemployment and hunger. So the fault lines in our society were made much deeper, and that I think was the same everywhere in the world, but ours was the apartheid legacy of our society was really shown up in its worst way through this virus. I suppose the next one is something that people experienced all over the world, not just here. Someday, one day, 2 day, Wednesday, Blur's day, Bye day, Scatter day, someday. Repeat cycle till virus free. Lockdown was very, very strange. It was the weirdest thing and everybody commented on it. What was the day? You kind of lost track of things. And this is another thing I think that's sort of a global phenomenon, not just here. Meet Denzel, till lately in marketing, PhD epidemiology, University of WhatsApp. This is Thandi, previously in cosmetic sales, MSc microbial genetics, University of Google. Sanjay, formerly accountant, BSc honors virology, University of YouTube. And you may have come across Karen, former occupation unknown, PhD immunology and professor of everything, University of Facebook. Keep spreading the knowledge. I'm sure there are probably people even watching who are maybe one of those newly created or self-appointed experts, but certainly I'm sure all of us know people like that. It's amazing how everyone became an expert in everything. Back to our friend Donald Trump. I mean, he's been a huge part of this year. He's been a huge part of how badly everything has been handled in societies where populist leaders are in charge. I mean, he absolutely is emblematic of that. When he suggested his weird remedy, instead of taking the virus seriously, when he suggested that you kind of inject yourself with all these things. So plan B. We knew you'd be honored to participate in testing your theories. There's the wonderful Dr. Fauci, and there's the clinical trial, and he's going to inject him with disinfectant and bleach, which is something that those are things that Donald Trump actually suggested. He thought he calls himself a very stable genius. That's the most bizarre description I've ever heard of him. I think anyone who calls himself a very stable genius, but in particular Donald Trump, amazing. And these were the things he was suggesting. Now, coming from the World Health Organization, which is something that Donald Trump and people like him scoff at, there were all sorts of directives, including some fairly confusing ones around masks, whether you should wear one, whether you shouldn't. So at one stage, there was the sort of current mask directive was curbing the pandemic, mask advisory, N95 for health workers, a surgical mask for essential personnel, homemade for the general public, and gag for dangerous demagogues. Of course, the aforementioned Trump. But I am quite proud of this cartoon. You look down at the bottom. Because it's fairly early on. This is in the middle of April. It's got a little asterisk there. The dangerous demagogues include, down at the bottom, Bolsonaro in Brazil. Look what happened to Brazil. Modi in India. Look what happened to India. I don't think I had to be clairvoyant to figure out that these guys were going to handle it badly. Erdogan in Turkey. Boris Johnson, who had already by this time contracted the virus in England, in Britain. Kim Jong-un, who said that the virus didn't even exist in North Korea. Duterte in the Philippines, who said people who broke lockdown should be shot on sight. And Lukashenko in Belarus, and many others whose ego, lies, and blunders make them criminally liable for thousands of inevitable deaths. And of course, that is exactly what happened. So, now, on April the 23rd, our alert levels were announced because, of course, the tension, we were beginning to see that tension that was being seen all over the world between the absolute need for lockdown on the one hand, and on the other hand, in other words, to curb the spread of the virus, but on the other hand, the opening up of the economy because people were starving and the economy was absolutely tanking here and elsewhere, and people were losing their jobs, unable to work, all sorts of things. So the alert levels were announced, but then at the same, that's 23rd of April, 27th of April was Freedom Day, and I just thought of this quote from Nelson Mandela: "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." And of course, the hill that we've climbed is freedom. And suddenly Cyril Ramaphosa finds he's got to put on his mask, and there's that famous graph of the idea of flattening the curve. We need to make sure that that curve is a stable. People are going to contract the virus, but it's going to be in a sort of stable and not as intense manner. And it's not going to do that absolutely cataclysmic climb, and it's in order to get the health services ready so that for the inevitable infections that will occur, but hopefully not at such a heavy rate. On May the 4th, it was announced we were going from level 5 to level 4, alert level 5 to alert level 4. May the 4th, I always like to, I'm sure a lot of people point out, of course, that Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you. I do like that. But that happened to be on that day. And so first jog checklist: mask, keys, Bonzo's leash, doggy do bags, level 4 regulations, 5-kilometer radius map app, set timer, and lawyer on standby. Remember how there's weird regulations and how far you're only allowed 5 kilometers away from your house, and only between 6 and 9. And so the kind of lawyer on standby, I think that people did react to that because it did feel like, you might be arrested, and some people were for very weird reasons. At level 4, something else happened which was fun. People were complaining that they didn't have books to read, couldn't get books online, and suddenly it was announced that you could get books online, and they were going to be from Exclusive Books. But the funny thing was that they were going to be delivered by Uber Eats. So here at Daily Maverick, somebody, I think it was Richard Poplak, was the first one. He's like mused on the WhatsApp group what kind of books might be available in that way from Uber Eats. And it started a riff that went for a few days. I'm going to just read a few of them. So it says, hungry for a good read, level 4 latest, Exclusive Books orders delivered by Uber Eats, Lord of the Fries, Great Expectations, Crime and Nourishment, Wars and Peace, Of Rice and Men. I can't stop this, man. Don Quixote, Pride and Prejudice, The Ketchup in the Rye, To Grill a Mockingbird, Moby Duck, The Lunch Pack of Notre Dame, The Adventures of Huckleberry Muffin, The Old Man and the Seafood, A Time to Bry, Empire of the Sunny Side Up, Lady Chatterley's Liver, the kind of weird one, The Postman Always Brings Rice, love that, The Slices of the Lambs, The Lord of the Onion Rings. By the way, only about I think a fifth of these are mine. The rest are all these fantastic minds at Daily Maverick, and which is great. For Whom the Taco Bell Tolls, Scone with the Wind, The Little Quince, Where the Wild Figs Are, Darwin's on the Origin of Spices, A Brief History of Time, One Flew Over the Couscous Nest, The Handmaid's Tale, Life of Pi, Bridget Jones's Dairy, The Treacle Has Landed, Half of a Yellow Bun, The Grill with a Dragon Tattoo, love that, Jurassic Pork, 50 Shades of Gravy, and then the South African section, Fry the Beloved Country, Long Fork to Freedom, Walk of the Bushveld, A Braai White Season, Because I Bite What I Like, My Traitor's Tart, The President's Kippers, of course that's Peter Louis Meiberg, The President's Keepers, not Peter Louis, Jacques Poe, there's Peter Louis Meiberg's Gangster Steak, and he of course is at Daily Maverick. Ferial Hafferty, also at Daily Maverick. What if there were no egg whites in South Africa? I heard the chicken wing call my name. The curious incident of the hot dog in the nighttime. Now a whole bunch of sort of eating ones like you're going to eat too much. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Pantry, A Tale of Two Sittings, 100 Years of Solid Food, brilliant. A Fridge Too Far, Around the Waist in 80 Days, and Dead Poets Society. So that was a fantastic riff, and I just had to do a cartoon using that. Also on level 4, it was announced that schools would reopen, but that was going to be kind of difficult, and it was grades 7 and 12 only, and living with COVID, the devil is in the detail. Just thought about how hard this was going to be. The masks, see on the board there, masks, social distancing, wash hands, surfaces, but there you see that the devil of that virus, because there are going to be people of different ages interacting with the children, people delivering, dropping. So the whole scenario is here. And it was, in fact, difficult, and they had to keep changing the regulations. I think the most bizarre thing around this time was that even though it was important to reopen, I mean, it was still very, very dangerous in terms of the virus, and you had to do things carefully. And you couldn't kind of gather you couldn't have sort of like social gatherings or whatever, but there was a weird exception. So in week 9, it's still too risky to gather with your friends, except when about 50 of you share an imaginary friend, in which case, feel free. And that was the level 3 religious gatherings. And for some ridiculous reason, this exception was made for religion, as it often is. Of course, there were some people who are outraged by this, the imaginary friend thing. That's not original, by the way. I think it's a genius idea of somebody that I've co-opted, the idea of the imaginary friend. But I thought the exception was crazy, and there were super spreader events that happened because of this. And the other thing that happened was that people started saying, well, if they're going to make exceptions, then kind of what about us? Which led to this cartoon. There are level 3 rules for reopening. Cyril's office, he said, how do you mean taking the gap? Becky Tsele storms in. Church of the Soul Food, a restaurant. Church of the Divine Image, a hair salon. Temple of the Holy Spirits, a bar. Tabernacle of the Moving Image, a cinema. Communion of the Heavenly Path, Mountain Club. Disciples of the Feet of God, Runners Club. Assembly of the Holy Water, Paddle Ski Club. Temple of the Immaculate Confection, Cake and Coffee Shop. Sanctuary of the Holy Herb, don't tell me, a Dacha Club. I told you this would happen. And what I liked about this as well is that people from various sort of paddle ski clubs and runners clubs and mountain clubs, whatever, actually were sending this thing around to each other and sort of enjoying it and kind of pointing out the absurdity of it. Now to something much more serious, the killing of George Floyd. And I can't breathe. You see that because of Trump's absolute callousness at his reaction and his support of the police and even army that he was using to crack down, and the absurdity of his response to COVID-19, I have George Floyd under the one knee, and then you see under the other knee is a COVID-19 victim. All African Americans were disproportionately affected, but Trump. This image, many of you will know, down at the bottom it says, after Goya's Saturn devouring his offspring, the great Spanish artist Goya did the most incredibly horrific painting like this, and this is a parody of it, as he rips the whole of the soul and the body of the United States, uses those stormtroopers, police and army to clear a path from the White House to a church where you see that Bible in front of his crotch. He held up a Bible, and that was the use. He used these army and police to clear the way with tear gas, while America burnt in a way that it hasn't since 1968. And of course, the protests happened, and it's the strange thing for me was also how people reacted in South Africa, because we got all kinds of very high-minded affirmations of the protesters. There you see Cyril Ramaphosa and the ministers of Defense and Police. We stand with African Americans over the murder of George Floyd by law enforcement officers. Found a way to use the masks as the famous see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And in the background, there's the killing of Collins Khoza by, in that case, army. And then there you see in that cemetery, and 12 other black South Africans killed in lockdown, mostly by police, but also a couple by army. And there was a strange denial, actually, of looking inward and seeing what was happening here, and that brutality of the crackdown and similar things happening. Of course, they weren't always quite as racialized as they were in America, where it really was white policemen killing African Americans. But really, it's a strange kind of anomaly here. And the other thing that was happening, now you can sort of see a couple of the cabinet ministers. I mentioned that leadership was good at the beginning, and then it really seemed to head south as the way that it was operated with the COVID command council, and some of the cabinet ministers were a little odd. So you see the very typical cartoon, take us to your leader, these aliens from some other planet land, point to Cyril, and well, he kind of says, leader, there, the collective. And that ANC manner of doing things in a collective led to the weirdest kinds of things. So I haven't even got time to show you all the different cartoons, but there's many of them are here in one cartoon: the alcohol ban, the cigarette ban, the ridiculous which clothes you could order and which clothes you couldn't order. You couldn't get something that went with something else, clothing wise, and hot chickens, cold chickens, the taxis, Fikile and Balula, the army and police and education, all that. And that collective really was ridiculous. You see there the taxi, Fikile and Balula, who kind of bent and buckled and pretended that he was standing up to the taxis. No one's ever really stood up to the taxis. This is a cartoon, the next one that I did about 20 years ago, but I thought it would be fun to show it. Now, the law of the land, magistrates, courts, subject to high courts, subject to court of appeal, subject to constitutional court, subject to taxi drivers. And that cartoon, 20 years ago, and it could have been done right now. Now, on alert level, we were on alert level 3, but something else was beginning to become very clear. The Thuli House eases lockdown. Our members need to get back to work. Party-approved corruption is now at level 2. And that was when the National Executive Committee of the ANC unsuspends Limpopo officials fingered for VBS looting. Of course, none other than Secretary General Ace Magashule, and that arrest warrant. I'm so happy to hear about that. Peter Louis Myburg at the Daily Maverick is right at the heart of the fingering of Ace Magashule from the start with his book Gangster State. And there's been so much about him and about his sons and about all the people that he's, when he was premier of the Free State, everything sort of went back to him. Around about this time, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, decided that they would lend us some money. That was controversial because a lot of people didn't want strings attached, but we did need the money. And as that was announced, the 70 billion rand, I thought of the people who really need the money. But as they approach, vroom, past them comes the ANC and crony cadres and tenderpreneurs. Massive corruption around funds for COVID-19 had already started surfacing. And the people who really needed there, you see the COVID patients and the doctors and the health workers, the poor and small business, and they're riding one of those bizarre ambulances, which is a motorbike and sidecar, ordered by the Eastern Cape and even approved by the health minister, Kize, who I don't think will ever live that down. There was a hell of a lot of other corruption that was starting to show. We all knew that there was well, there you see Comrade Ace, the new improved political protection equipment has arrived, and PPE was becoming a term. Of course, political, it's a personal protection equipment, but you know, CADA, identity concealers, dirty tender sanitizer, leaves no fingerprints, fat cat size, that's quadruple XL, and covers tracks. Unfortunately, this was the phenomenon that we were seeing. Cyril did try and crack down a little bit. He went to the National Executive Committee, and as he announced that he wrote a letter to the ANC, announced that he was really going to try and crack down. ANC special NEC meeting on corruption. This party crisis demands tougher internal action and support for legal action. The public wants to see many orange overalls. Any questions? Who's got the orange overall tender? Hey, my hand was up first. Says who? We'll split it after inflating it. I give up. At that meeting, there was something interesting that happened. That the results of the meeting are usually announced by the Secretary General of the ANC, but that didn't happen. In fact, Cyril, as president of the ANC, made the announcement of the outcome, and the Secretary General was in fact muted. He was genuinely muted, so I thought it was fun to do a cartoon, the NEC outcome, and there's that sort of Zoom meeting, which was how they did announce that, and there's Ace and JZ faction, you have been muted. Well, muted for a while, but I just thought I'd also show the previous book annual, that the cover of the previous annual that I did, which is from last year. Which side is up? Is it Cyril or is it Ace? You see Ace with his hand in the till, and there's the shower of Zuma, and he's stabbing Cyril in the heart. And Cyril has his hand on the scales of justice. So now, what about in the sort of remaining cartoons? What about opposition parties? Well, how relevant are they at the moment? Not that much. I thought I'd show one that is from this annual. It's when Helen Zille made her reappearance. I came in like a wrecking ball. I can't do that Miley Cyrus thing, but somebody sing that for me. There's the DA transformation. You see basically mostly black leaders, also Athol Trollip, but Musi Maimane, Herman Mashaba, they basically left the party. Helen Zille's, the signal of Helen Zille coming back in. I mean, Helen Zille, I don't know what has happened to her. She says she hasn't changed, but she definitely has changed. And it's affecting the party very badly. A more recent DA cartoon I did, there's Dinosaur Alliance, still with extra strength Tyrannosaurus, now washes even whiter. And the important thing on the side there is works darker shades out, contains no Moody, Maimane, Mashaba, Mazibuka, Delil, all the black leaders leave. What about the second biggest opposition party, the EFF? Well, they are supposedly freedom, they fight for economic freedom fighters, but clearly they are just total hypocrites. This is the VBS scandal. They had credit cards where the money was being funneled, like millions being funneled into their accounts and into the EFF account, both Malema and Floyd Shivambu, in particular Floyd. But both of them, and they've got all the details are kind of announced there. It's another story from Daily Maverick, Paulie van Wyk, absolutely fantastic story. And they held a press conference to kind of crow that they hadn't been arrested and by the NPA. And they're, missed. And there's the VBS prosecutions, but you see Rumble, there's that NPA. The next round of arrests, I'm sure will get them, and I hope so too. Another big issue that they got themselves involved in, but it was a genuine issue. And these are the kinds of things that we face in the New South Africa. A completely appalling advert put out by Clicks, There's the pencil test 2020 and the clicks, and it's that the derogatory approach to African hair, black hair, and it was unintentional, but it was so stupidly unintentional. And even some black people who were involved in vetting this advert, both from Clicks and the agency that made it, they had kind of passed this, which is completely weird. So these are the kinds of issues that we do have to deal with. Now, back in this last stretch is just back to the other corruption that was still going. Of course, there's the corruption related to the coronavirus, to COVID-19, but then there's the state capture stuff, which I have mentioned, and Jacob Zuma. There's so many about Jacob Zuma, but this is just one that picks up on a few things. So my first spin is for my court case. Next one's for Zondo. And his excuses: I'm sick, I'm busy, in Cuba, COVID-19, NPA plot, it's Pravin's doing, no time to prepare, dinner with Putin, Hanekom CIA plot, wives poisoning me, Gupta's froze my funds, dog ate my crib notes. Zuma has been, his Stalingrad tactic is to try and avoid both the court case, which has been running now for almost 2 decades, well, 1.5 decades, and the and appearing at Zondo. The last time he appeared, he just gave a whole series of conspiracy theories. Now he's been giving sick notes and whatever it is to try and get out of it. But there are subpoenas to get him there. And speaking of Judge Zondo, state capture inquiry now with subpoenas, tongue lashings, skewerings, Mark of Zondo. I'm loving season 3, and Mark of Zondo. There's somebody appearing there and get that famous Mark of Zorro or Zondo. But something happened. I think the idea that these hearings are going to end and his tenure is going to be up, and he's got to get stuff ready. He's been getting tougher, and he's been giving people tongue lashings and handing out subpoenas, and I must say I'm loving it. I really, and one of the things that's come out of some of that stuff is that also there can be arrests made based on things that have been said at the Zondo Commission, where it can be used as part of evidence. You don't have to incriminate yourself, as Do the Macorona has shown, but some of the evidence can be used. And here we have the Hawks Blackhead cleanup, this bizarrely named Blackhead Consultants. There's Edward Saudi, and the Hawks made a number of arrests. It's a pretty disgusting cartoon, but they're getting, these blackheads are getting shot out here. And there's Hermione Coronier, the Free State Asbestos Project arrests. And of course, they all devolve back to Ace Magashule when he was premier. And he's in all that asbestos project and so many other things devolve back to him. And that arrest warrant, I can't wait to see what's going to happen. Now, just the last couple of cartoons, we said goodbye to some great heroes. I mean, there's corruption, but they're also fantastic heroes. Unfortunately, some of them that generation is coming to an end, very much so. And this was when Andrew Mlangeni passed away. The comrade with nothing but his golf clubs and his integrity. Your table's waiting. And he was the last of the Rivonia trialists. Dennis Goldberg had died earlier, and he's joining his colleagues. For somebody as irreligious as me, I do a lot of these kind of heaven ones, but they're nicely symbolic. And then somebody else passed away who was also part of that. In fact, he was centrally involved in defending the Rivonia trialists, and that was George Bezos. And I got the idea to do, it says George Bezos, 1927 to 2020, human rights lawyer, agent of change, and a mensch. And based on the great caricaturist Hirschfeld, who used to weave people's, his daughter's name. His daughter's name is Nina, actually, funnily enough. My daughter's name is Nina. I've also done one of those drawings, but he used to weave their names into the moustaches and hair and folds and things of the clothes. So the Rivonia trialists are all starting from Mandela, all in and around his head, and then all sorts of other things that he did. Go look in the book to see all the rest of the things are in the rest of that. And then the last little thing that I've got here is to really bring us up to these last couple of cartoons are not in the annual. just after the annual. But of course, the American elections have been so huge. And I just thought the only good thing about COVID-19, this was before the election, just before the election, splat, re-elect me. And I was thinking, there's no way, by now, there's no way Donald Trump can be re-elected. I must say he mounted a kind of a rearguard action. It was a bit deceptive because it was all about the votes that came in from Republicans on the day, and the postal votes only got, because he poo-pooed the postal vote, only came in later. But the next one is, as the election has just happened, knife edge election. I win or the Dame gets it. And that knife edge, yeah, he's prepared to take the whole country down with democracy and everything. There's Joe Biden. Of course, it has swung further from this, and that takes me right there. And I could have talked a lot more about a whole lot of things, but I know our time is coming scarily.
It is, John. We have 13 minutes to go. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's incredible to see with the breadth of the issues you cover and how you succinctly, I think, tell these stories and add a piece of humor with it, add a touch of humor with it. And there's a lot of love you're getting from the audience. A lot of people are saying your brilliant work. But we've only got a few minutes to go, so 13 minutes to go, and there's a few questions. So let's get straight to them. First of all, though, the book is called Do the Macorona. And the first 50 signed copies have actually sold out, but we've added another 50 signed copies that you can buy if you click the link in the chat section. So let's get to questions, and let's try to push through them quite quickly. Dale Pinar asks, Jonathan, how long does it take you to do a detailed full-color cartoon?
And I always get this question first. Well, it's one of the two questions that come. And it's the only question that I will lie unashamedly about, because look, for two reasons. First of all, it's almost impossible to say how long one thing is going to take compared to another. But secondly, I take so long that I don't even admit to myself how long I take. It should take a few hours, but I often take a hell of a long time. I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
I read in one of your previous interviews that I think you said the things you fear most, deadlines, your wife, and getting boring. But let's move on to Janet Bloom. Janet Bloom asks, Zapiro, what research do you do to arrive at your cartoons? Do you have a daily routine of reading newspapers, listening to the radio, or is it a whiskey and soda for inspiration?
Much more like the routine, although routine would be too programmatic. I certainly, when I wake up in the morning, I have a little radio with a tiny little Sony radio rather than listening on a cell phone or something. My friend Andy Mason once saw me when I went to stay with him in Durban, and he arrived. There's a beautiful view, and when he arrived there, and I was kind of almost still asleep, but I had this thing plugged in my ear. He said, I take my news intravenously. So I listened to the radio. And I listen to a few different stations, and then I start scrolling, and obviously Daily Maverick, and then some other, some international platforms, this, that, and the other, and then I still get a couple of real newspapers, and then I start kind of thinking, but it sometimes takes a long time. I never know when the ideas are going to really strike. I then start around with little tiny little ideas rather than drawings, and then that develops into drawings. Yeah.
Our colleague Rebecca Davis asks, Jono, how do you feel about losing Trump as a cartooning target and gaining Biden?
Oh boy, Trump a million times better than Biden for a cartoonist. But people were asking, what are you going to do without Zuma? And Zuma is a brilliant character for a cartoonist. First of all, I want the guy to be gone. So, as a South African, I wanted him to be gone. And as a South African, I wanted Trump to be gone. As a citizen of the world, I wanted Trump to be gone. And the other thing is they're not gone. Whether it's Mandela, as you just saw, Mandela appears because he's still a symbol. And so is Trump. And so is Zuma. They're still around. They're still kind of active in some way, and they're also a huge symbol. So they never go, whether it's P.W. Botha, who pops up somewhere, or Manto Shabalala and Samang, or Zuma, or Mandela, or Trump, good and bad, they're still there as symbols. Yeah.
Let's move on to a question from Ulf Engel. I'm not quite sure what Ulf means by this, but Ulf asks, why hasn't so little changed since the ANC went 4x4? Oh, I'm doing these.
Why has so little changed since the ANC went in 4x4? Well, 4x4, of course, that's a reference clearly to the 4x4s of the 4x4s, or the vehicles that were kickbacks for the arms deal, and and why has so little changed? Because the system became, I think, the ANC as a party, as a movement, and then as a party, bought into the idea that, like, if everyone's doing it, it's okay. And the Blooming Integrity Committee and all these other bodies that try and put the brakes on corruption and try and bring people, the Ethics Committee, Integrity Committee, they were just laughed off like so much, chaff. And it's taken an unbelievable movement of citizens, and of some people, with a few people in the ANC, and of some people in the opposition parties, and civil society, and media, Daily Maverick being a huge part of it, to actually shift that. And unfortunately, it's we that cartoon, which side is up. We don't even know yet which side is really up. We think maybe Cyril's side slightly, but it's taking a hell of a lot to shift it.
Now, there are a lot of people also commenting on your version of Do the Macorona. I think we might have to release that as a ringtone, perhaps. But Stephen Goldfarb asks, have you had a death threat? And to that, I'd like to, I think you've commented quite a lot of times about such issues in the public, but I'd like to ask whether any of these issues have changed in recent years since Jacob Zuma resigned.
I never had a direct death threat from Zuma or his acolytes. Some of the very, very serious threats that I've faced have been around issues of religion, issues of things to do with the Middle East. As it happens, I'm a Jewish cartoonist, a Jewish South African who is very, very critical of the state of Israel and of political Zionism and of the Israeli Defense Force and of the occupation. But I'm also, so I get some support from some Muslim people, the Palestinian cause. I support the Palestinian cause. On the other hand, there have been some Muslim people who've been offended by my support of the right of people to draw anything they want, including the Prophet Muhammad. I have drawn the Prophet Muhammad myself. In 2010, I got 6 death threats for that. There was actually an assassination plot. I know that saying that on a webinar where I mean how many hundreds of people are watching, and where it kind of goes
500
is a problem. But I support the people who've actually paid for those kind of things with their lives in France, in Denmark, and other places. There have been I think it's really important to support freedom of expression in every form. I think tolerance from religion the tolerance about religion should come from people who have a belief system, and that shouldn't be so fragile that they actually think that it's their right to kill or hurt other people. But there are also political groupings that are pretty scary. And if I lived in Gauteng or KwaZulu-Natal, I think I wouldn't be quite as blasé about some of the things that I've done. I think I would have been under, like many journalists have been, I think I would have been under serious threat for doing exactly what I have done. And we have colleagues in Zimbabwe and cartoonist colleagues in other places who have in fact faced some very, very severe things. But I've had a number of death threats on a number of occasions.
When you were speaking, I think it was a Daily Mavericks The Gathering in 2018, you said before or in the past, when you publish a cartoon, you'd speak to editors and ask, can we justify it? Does it work? And you said you wanted to add a third question, which I'm summarizing, but basically, might the negative backlash distract from the message you're trying to put across? Have you had to ask that third?
Great on that. If I'm going to do something, I still want to keep the political impact of it, but I think that the especially if I consult with some colleagues and we decide that it's risque, politically it's very strong, but the image or the metaphor may be misread or misused or misunderstood in a way by some people, and it may be become such a distraction that it takes away from the political impact. Then I will always still find something that says something very, very strongly and harshly if I want to, but I may have to find another way of saying it, another metaphor. As in what I've said before, is that I think it's the difference between self-censorship and emotional intelligence. In a sense, I've got to take that into account. And I think a lot of conversation, I had a discussion, funnily enough, with Helen Ziller, where I tried to persuade her of this. And she said, you of all people, cartoonists, you self-censoring. I said, no, I really think that tone matters in this era. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions. One, which is from myself, which I'm hoping you can just try to succinctly answer. But your advice to other cartoonists is to think in metaphors, to have a passion for politics, and to say something, as well as think laterally. Can you explain what you mean by think laterally?
Well, the lateral thinking sometimes is the last thing that happens, because I try and think conceptually first, and then the lateral thinking. I try and do all the hard work. You do the concept. What am I trying to say, really? What am I trying to communicate? What is my political message I'm trying? What are the subjects that maybe link together with each other? And then the lateral thinking, the kind of that weird thing that happens when you go for a run or take a shower. I've always thought that's funny for me. Go and take a shower or something, and something happens, and it clicks in. I think with any creative process, whether you're talking about cartooning or writing or music or whatever, there is that thing where something comes in which you didn't even expect. You don't even know how it works, don't know how the magic happens, but then that takes what you were trying to do from being good to being really good, and it happens every now and then, and I just love it. But I never know when it's going to happen.
And the final question from the audience is, what's your preference, black and white or color cartoons? What works best for you?
I like both. I really do. I really like the graphic sort of crispness of black and white. And sometimes I find I use color only when I feel that I really need to, where the cartoon needs it. But otherwise, I'm perfectly happy doing a black and white cartoon.
Jonathan Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us for this book launch and taking us through all your cartoons today. It was actually brilliant to hear your insights. The book is Do the Macorona. I see there's a lot of people who are calling for more signed copies, so maybe we can look into arranging something like that if there's the demand. But otherwise, you can find it, I'm sure you can order online or find it in your local bookstore. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and stay tuned for more Daily Maverick webinars soon.
Can I mention Mike Wills, who did the captions? Mike has been making the book. I've been working with Mike for the last quite a few years, and we've done many books together, and that's a big part in it, trying to kind of really get the exact kind of timing and the exact editing and what should be there and what should be left out. So yeah, and thanks.
Thanks, Jono. Stay tuned on Daily Maverick for more Zapiro cartoons. Good night.